During the spring of 2010, Douglas PUD completed the release phase of the survival verification study. The PUD is measuring the survival rates of juvenile anadromous fish passing through the Wells project by pit tagging and releasing yearling summer-fall Chinook above and below Wells Dam, and then comparing the survival rates as they pass through downstream pit tag monitoring and interrogation facilities. The 2010 survival study is a required element of the Anadromous Fish Agreement and Habitat Conservation Plan, or HCP. The HCP is an agreement between various federal and state agencies and local Indian tribes, which commits Douglas PUD to a 50-year agreement that will ensure that the Wells project has no net impact on Mid-Columbia River salmon and steelhead runs. The HCP also provides Endangered Species Act coverage for all of the permit species. The HCP requires that juvenile fish survival through the project be in excess of 93%. Survival studies are used to verify that the survival of juvenile fish is above the 93% project survival standard and to determine the required level of hatchery mitigation to compensate for unavoidable losses through the dam. During 1998, 99, and 2000, Douglas PUD undertook extensive pit tag survival studies that documented that the survival rates for fish passing through Wells Dam were in excess of the standards required by the HCP.
My name's Shane Bickford. I'm a fisheries biologist with Douglas PUD. Tonight we're out on a rotary screw trap that we've put in the Methow River. The reason we're out here collecting fish in this rotary screw trap is for a survival study on active in-river migrating Chinook through Wells Dam on the Columbia River.
Every 10 years, the HCP requires the district to verify that the Wells project survival standards are still being achieved at the project. The last survival study at Wells Dam was in 2000, or 10 years ago. So, the purpose of the 2010 survival study is to verify that the project is still in compliance with the 93% juvenile project survival standard and to establish the hatchery mitigation levels for the next 10 years. A critical element of the Wells survival studies has been the ability to interrogate pit-tagged fish at Rocky Reach Dam, located just 45 miles downstream from Wells Dam. 13 years ago, Douglas PUD worked with Chelan PUD to install a pit tag interrogation system in the then Rocky Reach prototype bypass system. In the ensuing 10 years, Chelan PUD has constructed a new permanent juvenile bypass system that at the time of construction did not have the ability to house a pit tag detection system. Without the ability to detect pit-tagged fish at Rocky Reach Dam, the first detection site for Wells survival study fish would be over 300 miles downstream at McNary Dam. However, during the last 10 years, pit tag detection technology has improved to the extent that constructing a detection system at Rocky Reach was possible. Douglas PUD worked with Chelan PUD and Biomark to replace existing flow spreaders in the bypass system at Rocky Reach with new flow spreaders that would house rectangular pit tag antenna arrays.
Today the crews have been installing the brand new fiberglass reinforced plastic flow spreaders in the Rocky Reach juvenile fish bypass system. The flow spreaders are an integral part of our pit tag detection system that we're installing within this bypass. We went through a lengthy design process, and what we ended up doing was needing to replace the all-steel flow spreaders at the end of this, these two flumes with fiberglass reinforced plastic flow spreaders because the antennas need a space around them where there's no metal, especially ferrous metal. So we rebuilt this identical to the original flow spreaders that were replaced.
Detection at Rocky Reach will drastically reduce the number of fish needed for the study and is expected to result in significantly more precise and accurate survival study results. The 2010 Survival Verification Study would release over 80,000 pit-tagged Chinook smolts in 15 replicate release groups during a 30-day study window. In order to ensure that the 2010 survival study is comparable to past studies, the same contractors and consultants that assisted the district during past years of study were used during the 2010 study. PUD biologists and staff working with the HCB Coordinating Committee developed the study design. The fish were pit tagged during March of 2010, but the study began over 2 years ago.
All other things being equal, their entire life's history on spawning, incubation, early rearing, all the way through the pit tagging, they're treated exactly the same, so there's no variabilities. So the only variable is when they are put into the river, where they're put into the river. So our passing study fish are summer chinook, a yearling stage. The yearling fish, once trapped and spawn, go into incubators that are on chilled water, which retards the development of those eggs. So they need to be released at 10 fish per pound in the second spring of their life. So right now you have guys in the pond. As soon as they're done with the next group of fish, they will actually be taking fish out of the lower end of that raceway, pit tagging them, and putting them back into the upper end of that raceway.
Well, I'm Scott McCutcheon. I work for Biomark. I'm the manager of the tagging operations. Well, we bring the fish in via pescolator. The fish are held in a 500-gallon water tank with fresh water flow through. Then we dip the fish out into an anesthetic trough with a dip net. Those fish are held in there until they become anesthetized. They're moved to the next station on the table. Another dip net is filled, so we always have a continuous flow of fish. So the first basket of fish will be tagged by 2 tagging personnel, and once the fish are tagged, they're placed into a trough that flows down to a person who is operating a digitizer. And that person will pull out the fish, pass it across the tag detector, and then they'll use a stylus to take the link. And once the data is collected from the fish, it's placed into an outflow pipe that flows out into a designated raceway.
The dedicated raceways used for the study fish were segmented in order for the 15 groups to be reared in similar conditions. The second significant change from prior studies involved the pit tagging recovery process. During the 1998, 99, and 2000 studies, fish were collected and then released 24 hours after being tagged. During the implementation of the 2010 study, fish were tagged over 2 months prior to the study. By modifying the handling protocols, the fish were provided a 2-month recovery period so that fish stress, poor pre-release growth rates, and tag shed could be eliminated from the study. The idea is to have healthy fish that have not been stressed prior to release, so that the measurement of survival while passing through Wells Dam is truly indicative of the population of untagged wild and hatchery fish migrating through the project during the 2010 migration. This is the release phase of the 2010 survival verification study for the Wells project. Currently, we're at the Wells Fish Hatchery where we're interrogating the fish we tagged back in February of this year.
This morning, the Biomark and PUD crews came down and crowded 6,000 fish onto the collection net that feeds the fish into the pescolator. These fish are pit tagged. We're going to run them through the pescolator so that it is a water-to-water transfer of fish. We're not netting them. The fish will run down this white pipe, a 3-inch PVC pipe, and go through a device called the singulator. The singulator will ensure that there's only one fish passing through the detection coil at a time, so there's no interference. What we're doing is interrogating the fish at that site and then randomly assigning them to either an upstream or downstream release location.
There's 15 replicate releases for the study over 32 days. We're using 82,000 fish for the study. We're at the Methow release site for the 2010 survival study. The district's line crews are loading the barges using a truck crane. When the release containers are loaded onto the barge, the first thing we do is we turn the water on so that the river water can displace the transport water and we can get the fish acclimated to the ambient river conditions. And we'll collect a dissolved oxygen reading and a water temperature reading from the river as well as from the release containers. And our goal is to have the dissolved oxygen and water temperatures match identically to what the river water temperatures and dissolved oxygen levels are. Once we've arrived at the release sites, we'll go through our pre-release check. We will collect dissolved oxygen and water temperature readings to ensure that we've matched the ambient conditions in the river. Then we'll open the release container lids to verify that there aren't any fish that got damaged during the loading and transport out to the site. We also do a general behavioral indication of whether the fish are agitated or relaxed. We'll collect the weather conditions at the release site and go through the release protocol at that point, which is basically opening the cam lock fittings, letting the fish swim out of the release containers, and there's a netter on the back of the barge that tries to catch any fish that hit the cam lock fitting when they're going out that may be stunned or got damaged during the pescalation. It's our final quality control is the netter. And at that point, the fish are free to swim down through the Wells project. At the Okanagan release site, the barges are loaded in the city of Brewster, and the barge is towed upstream about 5 miles to the mouth of the Okanagan River. Once at the mouth of the Okanagan, we'll acclimate the fish on Okanagan River water and then release them at that site. At the tail race release site, the transport truck will equalize the travel time and distance by driving down to the Chelan turnoff and coming back. That will provide 25 to 30 minutes of road time for the fish, which will match very closely with the Okanagan and Pateros release sites. Once the truck gets back to Wells Dam, the hydromechanics at the Wells project will use a truck crane to load the 5 release containers with 2,500 fish onto the barge. The barge will then be towed out into the tail race, and the fish will be released evenly across the whole project, releasing fish at spillway 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, which are all bypass spill bays. The successful completion of the 2010 Survival Verification Study is essential to the long-term operations of Wells Dam. By verifying that the survival at Wells is still in excess of the levels allowed within the HCP.